Good afternoon, everyone. I know that we'll have folks joining us, but we're excited to have you here for our webinar today on the changing workforce. And before we go into introductions, just a couple of logistical pieces. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Linda Wiley. I am the Director of Online Learning here at ACUHO-I, and one of the functions of my role is Student Affairs Certification. So if you are a certificant and you are here for a continuing education credit, I will put a link in the chat toward the end of our program, which will lead you to our Qualtrics form for you to request the CE. If you are interested in student affairs certification, thank you, Brooks. If you're interested, then I'm also going to put a link in. We are very excited to be launching a preparation program this fall with our partners at ACUI and NERSA for the specialty certifications in our areas. We will spend 10 sessions together, 8 of those focusing on each of the domains that are covered by the specialty exams. And we have, in addition, just like we have our subject matter experts today, we're going to have 8 additional subject matter experts in those sessions that will be talking about the domains of certification. So I will put that in the chat as well. But to get us kicked off, I'm going to turn it over to the fantastic Denaja Thomas, and she is going to introduce our guest and facilitate our conversation. So, Denaja.
Wonderful. Thank you, Linda, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denaja Pendergrass Thomas. I serve as the director of the Placement Exchange, where we like to say we are your career hub and resource for longevity and student affairs. I have an affinity for housing and residence life. That has been my trajectory until my role with TPE. And so I am always excited to hang out with our members at ACUHO-I and talk workforce sustainability. I am joined today by two amazing professionals in this field who carry a wealth of expertise and perspective. So not just opinion, but lived experience, who are wonderful at staff development and who I think will bring wonderful insight to this topic today. So I won't delay in getting to them because they are the stars of today's conversation. So I would love to introduce to you Gabe Perez and Mary Jans. I will give both of you a moment. Share your name, campus that you are at. And it's like a Sunday school question, but I always like to have people share why you said yes to Linda's invitation to spend time with us today. So, Gabe, why don't you get us started?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Gay Perez, and I'm currently at the University of Virginia. I serve as the Assistant Vice President of Student Affairs and Executive Director of Housing and Residence Life. I am the most recent past president of ACUHO-I. And so when Linda called and said, "We need you," I was like, "You got me."
Are you done now, Kay?
Yes, I am. Thank you for that pause. That pregnant pause was your cue to go,
Yes,
Mary.
thank you. Mary Jans. I work at Marquette University, serve as the Executive Director of Housing and Residence Life. I have been in a number of roles, but one of my most recent roles was working in partnership with the amazing Denaja Thomas and Olin Garrett as we looked at workforce sustainability as it was a portion of the future of the profession.
Wonderful. Thank you both for the introductions. Linda has assigned us 3 things to do before we get into this conversation. So Gay is going to come back around to you. Would you share a little bit about the Future of the Profession project, just to give us some framework around why this conversation is so important?
Sure, happy to. As the world was coming out of the pandemic, I think the ACUHO-I leadership at that time recognized that the traditional way of running housing and residence life was changing and it was evolving. We were experiencing things that we had never experienced before. And so it was a great time to form a task force, and it was labeled Future of the Profession. But some of the key elements of it, it was a multi-year, multi-phased effort. It was an iterative process. We involved hundreds of voices that sat around the table for multiple years into an inquiry phase, a discovery phase, and then a delivery phase. As Mary mentioned, she was part of one of the discovery phases and deliverable phases of 8 imperatives, which has come out of the future of the profession. And the 8 imperatives, the one we are talking about today is enabling workforce sustainability, but there are also 7 others, which was the importance of facility design and maintenance in our work, increasing belongingness, fostering strategic collaborations, both inside the department, in institution, as well as outside, shifting the higher ed business model, strengthening mental health, and then the value proposition of campus housing.
Awesome, thank you. So perfect volley to Mary. You want to share a little bit about the Workforce Sustainability Work Group?
Yes, I think even as you listen to those other 7 imperatives, you can see where they intersect with one another, ensuring that we are looking at the future of our profession. And we looked at that workforce sustainability. We started to see a sort of a changing nature of the next generation coming in, coming out of that pandemic, some of the demands on that live-in role in particular, really being a more than a 24/7. It felt like at times you were packing so much in, the job responsibilities. And so we spent a lot of time looking at, as the industry is evolving, what are some of those trends? What are we hearing? What are we seeing? Can we focus on the well-being of staff while we're also focusing on their professional development, helping them come into a job, understand their role, and then figuring out what next step should be in managing? How do you help a young entry-level professional learn to advance? How do we teach them? How do we provide them with opportunities? And I think we probably, all of us on this webinar today, have been asked in an interview, well, tell me about the work-life balance of X position. That's becoming more and more of a concern. And I think we have to look at that. It's not a 50-50, like I gave you 10 hours today, so I'm only going to give you 6 hours tomorrow. But it is that ebb and flow of, does it sort of even itself out? Can you have a time when work is a priority, but can you also have a time when home or life outside of work is equally a priority? So we looked at job descriptions and maybe standardizing some of those. What does it mean to be an early careerist or an advancing or mid-level professional? Because we all have different titles, right? So what were those definitions? We looked at the campus housing index. Can we ask some more important questions to really garner better feedback? And then we had a very long discussion about, a lot of times it's people like me filling that out. So I want to be like, yes, work-life balance is good. So how are we really getting at the heart of what our staff members are feeling, thinking, and living?
Thank you both for sharing that. I have to selfishly say, as a staff liaison to the project, it was wonderful for coming into the TPE role simultaneously with the future of the profession. ACUHO-I's partnership with NASPA was working to think about how to expand TPE to be more than placement, how to really think about how we serve the career life cycle of our professionals. And so being on that workforce with Mary and Olin and Vika and others before them in each iteration, it really gave TPE a foundation and framework to think about how we now serve the profession. And so one thing that I'll add to what you shared, Mary, is that this work group offered up a definition of workforce sustainability, which was really important to help us think about what it means to have this conversation and other conversations like it. And so I appreciate what they were able to offer is now a working definition, and that guides the work that TPE does. And so now in our current iteration, you'll hear our tagline say that we work towards a sustainable, diverse, fulfilled, healthy, and vibrant workforce. And I say all the time that it's highly ambitious, but if your vision is not ambitious, then what are you doing this good work for? And so within that, we're affirming that there's got to be pedagogies, there has to be systems, there have to be structures in place to actually create workplace environments that sustain our workforce. And so, with that, TPE focuses on 8 areas of workforce sustainability, and those areas are nurturing diversity, equity, health and well being, connectivity, value, community, and maturity. And again, there are things that we all know anecdotally, but it's nice to have it live in a place as target areas for what we focus on. And so I'm excited about today's conversation because it really touches on each one of those areas that we now can show impact the sustainability of our workforce. So thank you both for level setting for us and helping us understand where we are with the Future of the Profession Project, the Workforce Development Work Group, and why I get to have the pleasure of moderating with the two of you all today in my role with TPE. So, with that being said, we want you all who are with us to engage for just a few moments. We want to know who you are, what's going on with you, and we want to make sure that we talk about some things that are important and relevant to you being a part of the conversation with us today. So, the chat does allow for you to comment as an attendee. I would love to hear from you. Tell us if your early careers, mid-level, or senior level professional, and then if you have any topical question that you want to make sure we cover. You can go ahead and put that in the chat, and between Linda and myself, we'll be monitoring that to make sure we get to it in the conversation. So tell us where you're joining us from, and if you have anything in particular that you would like to make sure we cover during our time together. So, Mary and Gay, I will let you ease into the conversation while people are sharing in the chat. What are your general observations these days around hiring and supervising a workforce that is increasingly coming together, or workers are coming together from more diverse backgrounds than our traditional kind of pipeline through a SAHI or a HISA program? What are your general observations these days?
I'll start, Gay.
Sure.
I feel like it seems simple, but onboarding is critical. I don't think we can go through the same iterations of training as we have in the past. I think weekly one-to-one times as that person, that new staff member is entering into their new role is also important. And then probably some time for walk-in questions. They're learning, they're trying to make sense of what they've done and put it into this new higher ed arena. And I think as a result, we've looked at some things like adding online training, because what we also know is that it's not a standardized recruitment time. Dinaja knows that even better. That's why TPE is in the fall, in the spring, because folks leave their roles at all times throughout the course of the year. So we've really looked at adding online training. We've looked at what are the skills that they bring in, and sometimes we help them make the connection to the job that they've been hired to do. So maybe they don't always see that, but we've really spent a lot of time looking at here's what you did and here's how it relates to this particular job.
And at Virginia, our goal has always been to support staff while maintaining a high standards. And even though people are coming in with professionally diverse backgrounds, we find that the performance differences are tied to their work ethic versus their background. And so what we have done is we've had to adjust, as Mary said, our meeting formats to encourage meaningful sharing. And then the one-on-one time seemed to be focused on the personal challenges affecting their performance. One of the frameworks of the future of the profession is mental health. And so we have seen a very much a switch from their ability to perform the jobs at the standards that we have set, and how it's intersecting with their personal challenges related to mental health. And so, you know, our challenges from a supervisory standpoint is coaching with empathy while upholding standards. So we've really made a switch in this last year and a half from theory-based to expectation-based and practical. So we're getting back to the practical nature of what the job entails, because these individuals are coming in without that framework that was provided in graduate programs early on in their master's level, and we're hiring more and more folks with coming straight out of undergrad.
One of the things I would add to that too is for a long time, one of the most important reference questions I asked was, tell me about their attitude and approach to work. And I think that gets at some of what Gay was talking about. Like if you come ready to learn, if you come ready to be, okay, if I make a mistake, how do I learn from that mistake? If you come saying, teach me more, tell me what I could have done better. And we're prepared to ask those questions like, what, as you look back on this situation, what are you thinking about? How might you have changed your decision? Or what did you like about the way that you managed the situation? I do think that affirmations are important to this particular group that's coming in. I think they're looking for what's that small success. They're a lot like a first year student on a college campus, right? Like what's familiar to me? What can I do? And so finding those moments of familiarity and then helping them feel comfortable with kind of walking into that environment that maybe isn't quite as familiar to them.
Thank you both for sharing that. With what you've said, I want to go to then what does training and onboarding look like, particularly Gay, with you all sharing the shift from theory to practical with expectation. I think it's probably a little further down Linda's list, but you organically went there. Knowing that you've made that shift, can you talk to us about how your training and your onboarding now looks compared to how it used to look?
Yes. For those mid-managers in the group as well as the directors, we actually consulted all of our staffs, especially those that had started with us mid-year last year, and their input really impacted how we changed our coordinator training. And our topics now include managing in the middle, entry-level development and what that really means, anatomy of a one-on-one, the boundaries and feedback, because we were having a lot of interpersonal issues around those. We added structure to our training, which included checklists, supervisory plans, things they might have gotten to spend time with in a master's level program that they are coming in not knowing that information. And then also really spending a lot of time with that level of people with fun activities to enhance that peer relationship.
We have a number of those as well. What we also found we really needed to spend time on is the valuable points of what you should be doing with that one-to-one with a staff member, because that was really sort of lost on them. It's not just a time to chit chat and talk about what you did for the weekend, though some of that is fine, but how are you making meaning of that time together? We had to kind of redo some of the idea of expectations. How do you give enough but not make it be a book in order for folks to be able to abide by, to ask questions, to be able to maintain that information? We've spent a lot of time on introducing them to various resources that they can ensure that they know when they should refer versus when do they keep the information to themselves. And then for some, it really is about introduction to university life. They probably all have been a student. They all have been a student on a college campus, but how do you make that transition to not being a student anymore, but healthy boundaries, what your role is? How do you conduct yourself? We've had some long conversations about office attire. I don't know, Gay, if that's been a part of yours or not, but some being like, well, I don't want to say what they have to wear. And at the same time, you want to look like a professional. If the president walks into your building one day, do you want to look like the students who live there, or do you want to look like the person that understands, manages, and has knowledge? So there's been some kind of back and forth on what does that mean to be a professional? What does that mean to work at an institution? What is the introduction to university life from the full-time professional's position?
I appreciate the topics that you all have touched on. It's similar to the conversations I've had anecdotally with other folks. Here's a question I want to nuance in there. For your mid-levels, those who are your ADs of training and onboarding or development, I've heard from my millennials that it feels like micromanaging to be this detailed now, particularly with early careers or entry-level staff. Have you had to work with your managers or supervisors around how to manage that feeling that it may not per se be micromanaging, but shifting the approach to meet the person you're trying to serve?
I actually have an assistant director who just started in December, and she had been out of the profession for probably 12 years and really wanted to come back, wanted to make more meaning, wanted to be able to contribute in an environment that was mission driven. And um, her fear was that if her direct reports didn't meet deadlines, didn't follow through on things, it was going to reflect poorly on her. So one of her staff members came to me and said, I get she seems like she works 24 hours a day, but you told me I don't have to work 24 hours a day. And I come in on a Monday morning and I haven't been on duty on the weekend. And there's a message in there about an incident that happened. And she's already saying, don't forget, you have to hear this as a conduct case and you need to get your letters out today. And he was like, I don't even have the chance to prove that I would do that. So it really did come back to him in the it was her desire not to micromanage, but it was her desire to make sure that all of her staff were meeting deadlines and looking good. That really backfired on her. And so we had to take a step back to say, you got to give them a chance to perform. If you've done the training, if they're doing the work, unless they've proven to you that they've not, you need to give them an opportunity. You know, time send your emails with delay send, whatever that is, but you don't have to send it on Sunday night because you spent time reading it, where maybe your direct reports weren't going to look at that until Monday morning.
The flip side to that is our structure came from a direct request of our entry level folks. Our mid level folks actually had to be kind of switched off, not to where Mary was, because we were now needing to encourage more timely situational based feedback, because they would allow their a free reign of their students to the point that there was frustration by their peers, or there was a big mistake that had been made. And in walking through it with my director, I was like, did you have conversations with them? And so what this has kind of led to, her working with our mid-level manager, just emphasizing the importance of timely situation-based feedback. And then also frequent reiteration of the expectations, because you have your training in July before any of the student staff go back. And so by September and fall break, when you are in the middle of the semester, those expectations sometimes, get muddled, or they get forgotten. And then also, I can't emphasize enough about the written follow-up for accountability, because we have gotten burned time and time again, because people are erring on the side of developmental and theory-based. And then oftentimes when they don't recognize the need for accountability too late, then your employee relations, it limits what you're able to do.
I think I oftentimes see that in I want to help my employee grow. I want them to become successful. We had the conversation, Mary. Okay, did you follow that up in writing? Well, no. And then I think they get themselves quickly to a point where they want to take some serious job action. But there's really nothing that shows an HR department that you have been giving that, other than you saying, well, I've been giving Denaja feedback and she seems to be taking it. And then they'd call Denaja in and Denaja would be like, she never gave me that feedback. I think the other piece that we've had to do is that sometimes everybody says they want to be a supervisor, until there's a problem, right? Like you all want to be a supervisor when you have a room full of Dinajas and Gay as your direct reports, but I think when there's a problem, then supervision is hard, right? And so we've had to talk about the importance of documentation. We've had to talk about the importance of when you have a meeting, following up first with an email, then a written letter. Maybe that means you're partnering with human resources in a performance improvement plan, but you can't go from 0 to 60 because you put up with sort of the frustrations for so long in hoping to be developmental.
Man, you all are making this easy. It's an easy segue to the next question because you really started to touch on it. I think Gay, you said it well, right? You have training in July. The water hose is turned on. You take it all in. You go through opening first 6 weeks. As you shift from onboarding and kind of the training piece into how you utilize your staff meetings and that one-on-one structure, are you finding that there are going to be topics that you do need to come back to or cover differently or expound upon to help people really hold on to that skill building?
Yes.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say. Yes. No, I'm just
Okay.
kidding. What we have found is that this is not a dig, but we had to raise our empathy and lower our assumptions.
Ooh.
So we had to, in a very nice way, revisit a lot of the topics because, we're just assuming because we've done it for 10, 15, 20 years that everyone gets it right away. And as we've said at the beginning of this session, our workforce has changed. And so we have to acknowledge that, and we have to then go back and figure out for each of your departments, what is it that
Mhm.
is your expectation? What are your standards? And they don't have to be what the standards were pre-COVID, because
Mhm.
what we're facing now in this country right now, um, it's changing the map. And so we have lowered our expectation. We've actually shifted from um, voluntary, gone are the days where I could say, Dinaja, I think you would be really great. Would you be willing to serve on this committee?
Mhm.
To, I need Dinaja, I put you on this committee because of
Mm.
X, Y, and Z. So being a little bit more structured and directive with our new folks. Um, we've also spent a lot of time, again, we talked about documentation, but also pattern tracking. Where is it when we have, I think we have 6, 7, 8, I think we have 6 to 8 of the entry level folks. What are we seeing with more than one of those and see what patterns are emerging and making sure that we're tracking that. And then, of course, we have frequent consultations with our employee relations folks.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Um,
Thank you for that.
I would add that what has also become critical in department meetings and in one-to-ones is offering the rationale and the reasoning behind policies, behind procedures, the opportunity to offer that rationale with space for questions if they don't understand or if they disagree, providing that environment where it's comfortable enough for them to say, that doesn't make sense to me. Why do you do it that way? And engaging in
Mhm.
that. I think if they're not familiar with the industry, other than from a student perspective, you have to understand, okay, here's the flip side of that. And then hear what suggestions they might have. It is one of the beauties of getting new staff every year, right? Like, oh, as a student, this is what we did, or in this industry, this is what we did. Maybe it is opening up our eyes to being more efficient and or more effective. The other piece that I wrote down in here is that in the one-to-ones, it's that comfort level. Maybe that's the empathy that you talked about, Gay, but it is really in, can I disagree with the supervisor? Can I offer a dissenting view? Can I ask a question? Will I be seen as I'm not competent to do my job if I ask a question? So we've we've had to be more open in accepting that and ensuring that those mid-level professionals who are supervising those, kind of entry level folks, that they're providing that environment where you can ask a question, where you can disagree, where you can not know something. For a while, I always felt like people didn't raise their hand because they wanted to be seen as all knowing. And we have to assume that they're not now. So revisiting the expectations in a one-to-one, taking time in a department meeting to really explain, to ensure that people know why we do what we do and not just spit out, here's what we're doing, because now that we're open and the school year is rolling, some of the folks in the room don't understand what we're talking about. It's like a different language for them.
And that's where I was going to hang out. Because you mentioned you know how someone on staff who was away for a while. You both talked about having folk now join teams straight out of their undergraduate experience. As a person who has an MDiv and came into this work, Lynn and I are always talking about the ways in which transferable skill set or experiences can make people qualified candidates and can bring value to the conversation. And they are on teams with folk who do have background in higher education leadership, student affairs. And so, in your observation of the peer engagement, how are you seeing that work out across colleagues to have a team that's got this diverse background and experience, particularly around, I call it that political acumen, learning how the university setting works, that decision, that political piece? How are you level setting the undergraduate who's now on a team with a PsyD graduate who's now on a team with someone with a social work degree or a counseling degree? I think, yeah, you talked about having some of the social piece for them to build camaraderie and collaboration. How's that dynamic working?
I would say, from the perspective of the institution or the department that are hiring this diverse workforce, I think we've had to move from the traditional ways of running our department to more adaptive leadership, and being open and transparent to pivoting when things are not working. We have had some really great hires, and we've had some not so great hires who very early on, just it wasn't good. No matter what we did, it was not going to work. We had, when you have all of those different levels coming in and working in the same position, you're going to have comparisons. You are going to have, when you have two supervisors, supervising the same level of positions, it's a dynamic that you have to continually manage. When you have those that are struggling to understand versus those that are, get it, it's easy, the students love them, and they can be very um, successful in their performances. So I think it's a balance. It's very hard to just level set from the starting point. Every year is a journey from start to finish. And so you just kind of evaluate what went well, what personalities, what pattern tracking, did we see, and how can we either address it, adjust for it, or take some other actions. But I think adaptive leadership, and you have to be willing to stop doing something because it's just not working.
Mm-hmm. When Gay used the term pivot, I had written that down in my notes beforehand. We so hated that term during the COVID period because we
I
seemed like
loved
we
it.
were pivoting all the time, right? We thought we had a plan and then we had to pivot again. But one of the things that I would add to what Gay said is I think it's also in looking for those key leaders among that cohort. If hopefully you always have a trusted person or two that will be the person that will say to either their direct supervisor or find their way to my office, ex-hall director is just like blowing up this group chat with questions that they should know by now, or how do we better utilize this, or this doesn't seem to be working for the group. So I think it's in identifying who are those that you really do see as the future of our profession? Like they get it, they're learning, they're leaders, they're willing to raise their hand. In terms of Gay's comment about committees, like I don't know, maybe it's because I'm at a Catholic institution. The Catholic guilt runs wild here, but all I have to do is say, tap somebody on the shoulder and say, I think you'd be really good on this committee. And they feel honored at the moment. And I do that with thought, right? I don't do that just willy-nilly to put a body on there, but I've had a conversation or their supervisors had a conversation with me for an experience that they want. And then I'm able to relate that back for here's why I'd like for you to do this. And I would say 9 times out of 10, they're like, yes, I would love that experience. But I think it's in identifying who are those key leaders in that group that can kind of lead you in the direction, whether you're pivoting or not. A perfect example is I had a couple of assistant directors who did a program at ACUHO-I about this trauma-informed duty scheduling. And based on that program, there was a setting where it actually caused more trauma for some with how they had arranged that. And so as I started to hear this, as they were, I was just kicking off the year meeting with all of the live-in staff, and I came back to the central staff and I was like, we have to look at this. Like it was a swing and a miss for this one particular area. I get where you were going, but we didn't involve the people that it was impacting. And so to Gay's point, you got to go back and kind of juggle and say, oops, we had a misstep here. So and that's good modeling, I think, for those younger professionals too, that you can say, we thought this was going to work. We thought this was a good idea. Lesson learned, it's not. How do we fix it?
Which again gives me a perfect segue to talk about Pro Devo. When I came through during the summer, it was slow. So you had collaterals to do your upskilling and get experience across campus. Anecdotally, with some senior housing folk, they have talked about having staff who know that housing is not their long term. And so they were like, I'm pulling teeth to get people to use professional development funds or to go to conferences that 5 or 10 years ago everybody was buying to go to. With the diversity of your staff on your campuses, talk to us about what professional development looks like. A little bit about how funding works. Do you have people that take advantage of it? Are you seeing an interest in other conferences or focus areas with people bringing in that diverse background?
I would have to say that we have had to coin the term reigniting growth. And because we had people who were very reticent to get involved, so those senior housing officers, I think that is across the board that we're seeing now. So we were very intentional in starting small with support, individual one-on-one, but really sharing that culture of your professional development, whether you're going to be in housing or not, is a shared responsibility. We do provide, when funding is available, professional development amounts for all levels of staff. We have also hosted book clubs. And so for our entry level folks, we had them read last year Radical Candor. And for our mid level folks, we had the Psychological Safety Playbook to try to get them to match the book to their position and what they're struggling with. And the Radical Candor book with a peer of diverse backgrounds really helped the dialogue. And then for our mid-level folks, the psychological safety playbook gave them the framework to have some difficult conversations during their one-on-ones. We have seen now more encouragement in presenting programs, at the state level. Start small, just go to the meeting, get involved, that kind of thing. We also are very supportive of grad and certificate programs and encouraging that. And then also these webinars are also a good opportunity.
Yeah.
But it is a slow process. So it's been very interesting. It's like a transition from where we were to now where we're trying to get these folks.
We also read Radical Candor as well. And then one of the other books that we've used for both entry level and mid level is The First 90 Days. And I think they've done an update to that book as well. That's sometimes where I see staff make the biggest kind of critical errors, and so early on can really impact. They step on important toes. They haven't kind of listened long enough before they're jumping in, whatever that might be. But really garnering, what do I need to learn? Who do I need to, there's an org chart, but who really holds the cards? And how do I really understand the working of this particular organization? That was really important. For a long time, everybody thought, oh, development means I go to a conference. It can also mean doing a webinar. It can be, I had an employee that reports to me for sorority and fraternity life, and she was really struggling with supervising. So there was an online supervision course that she went through, and then we talked about those things. So, and then the other piece that I don't want them to lose is like raising your hand to do something that's different from your job description or is adjacent to your job description is a really good form of professional growth. The best opportunity I ever had is when we built 2 new residence halls and a new dining facility. And much of that, I remember sitting in the basement of one of our administration building, and the contractors were talking about this, and I would Google, like, what does this acronym mean in the construction world? And then I'd be, oh, yes, now I can engage in that conversation. So really digging into your work or your adjacent work or raising your hand for an opportunity. There's article discussions we've had. The NASPA for East Regional is here in Milwaukee, so encouraging them. A year ago, Campus Home Live was in Milwaukee, so it made it easy for me to afford to send a lot of folks that could really start to network and make valuable connections. I think things like NASPA and ACPA does allow you to branch out beyond housing to garner some additional experiences, and then partnering on a committee that might involve some folks from student activities or community service also expands your world as well.
I love it. That's my shameless plug for strategic volunteerism. I had a job seeker say, I need this budget experience and I'm not going to get it in my role. And I said, well, find a volunteer opportunity or serve on a committee that will allow you to have that exposure and build that skill. I spent plenty of summers with my friends in housing, walking buildings and learning about renovations. Summer is a great time, particularly if you need the housing ops
Yes.
side of the house
Yes.
too. Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. Probably not in the organized way that Linda would have liked. We really did touch on all of our questions. Thank you for going with the flow of the conversation. Before we open it up to questions from those who are in attendance, was there anything about the recruiting, the onboarding, the development, or the feedback process that you really want to make sure people in attendance get to hear from you that I might not have touched on?
Here's what I'd like to just add. I really thought about when you bring somebody in from a different background, what are the positives that you get and what are some of the areas that maybe you need to focus on? And I have seen, particularly at the mid-level, oftentimes they come better prepared to handle challenges because they've had good life experience and varied work-life experiences. I've also found that they're oftentimes able to manage the supervisory challenges. If they've had supervision before, they don't so tiptoe on providing feedback, and yet they can provide it in a direct and somewhat caring way so that the person on the receiving end gets that there's a problem, as opposed to I've so tiptoed around it that I think we're just grand and I'm doing a great job. And then I think they've also been better organized with administrative skills and budget skills. I've found they're much better prepared than those coming up through the traditional student affairs track of a SAHI grad program in terms of stepping in and being able to manage a budget. I do feel like their writing skills and their writing abilities sometimes lack. Like I'll get an email from an assistant director and I'll be like, Oh, you didn't send that out yet, did you? Like, I do feel like sometimes they just need a little more encouragement where maybe you get more of that as you're writing those papers in a grad program. Um, and just really, I think more time to introduce them to the intricacy and the importance of the parent in the project of a campus housing situation as well.
Gay, anything that you had on your list that you want to make sure they take away?
Well, no, I was just going to ask the group where are they getting their entry level? Like the
Um,
recruitment scene, the cycle, the old cycle is gone, like,
yes.
that type of thing. And, and TPE is a good example of going, online. So I'm just curious where other folks are getting their workforce these days.
Perfect. We'll see. We'll see if anyone has anything they want to share. While they are putting that in the chat, we'll do two things at one time. While they're putting that in the chat, Gay, there was a question for the two of you around um, what are your thoughts around rewriting job descriptions or position descriptions to be more flexible with what is required or preferred so that with this candidate pool or people with diverse backgrounds, you're able to capture them as viable candidates? Has there
Well,
been any rewriting?
oh, absolutely. We've totally rewritten ours. I mean, we've taken out the two things that we've done is we've taken out the master's level position that's required. And we have also we don't have any live-in positions anymore.
Mm.
So as a result, I think that the expectation and standards around certain traditional live-in responsibilities um, are no, we don't have them here. And so, like, we don't have desks. So and so we don't have live-in staff either. So I think that has changed. But as far as job descriptions and with especially with what UVA and lots of other schools have done, um, they have it's come down from our EOCR how our job description. So UHR has also modified all job descriptions with certain phrases and other things like that.
Yeah, we've done some modification as well. I mean, when I look at when I first came here, what the job description looked like, and it was like 2 or 3 pages worth of, it's now pared down to 10 important functions that are more generalist functions that hopefully they have a good deal of those experiences, or they can take what they've done or learned in life or what they've done along the way to be able to say, here's something that I've done that would meet that expectation. Our interviews have also changed as well. Gone are the days of the day and a half, like come in and they're about 4 to 5 hours total, including typically a breakfast and maybe a lunch with students. What's important for them to know as they make decisions about coming to work here, what do they need to see? We do still have live-in positions here. We do still run front desks here. We are in the heart of a city. So it's somewhat expensive, so it is an advantage as well. But it's also, I think, the expectation that upper administration has as well as parents have in terms of who's living and working with their students when they drop little Johnny off and they're going back to California and they're leaving him in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Mhm. Perfect. I would tell you in the chat, people said they're doing their usual posting, higher ed jobs, LinkedIn, and other websites, emails to former colleagues and employees, word of mouth. Molly shared they don't often get folk with the RA experience or full-time res life experience due to their competitive package for applicants, which I would say very quickly, anecdotally is on par with just about everyday conversation with employers at TPE. The biggest thing you all are asking for is pipeline, right? We we love TPE as long as TPE helps us find the candidates. And so working very closely with NASPA faculty, it is a mixture of a campaign that continues to tell students in our pipeline, there is a place for you in the field, while simultaneously now, right, dipping our toes in other spaces to strategically say, right, you have an MSW and you're looking for a shift in professional experience or a pause or adjustment in your journey. Have you considered how student affairs can do that? You've been a full-time counselor or therapist. There's space for you in higher education. And so part of our work is to think about what those transferable skills are. To Gay's point, when we really look at, I like how you said that, the high standards and the work ethic. We can train you. If you've got the technical skills, we can train you. And so identifying some of those industries or roles where people can make a smooth transition, and then on behalf of student affairs say, hey, have you considered this field as a viable part of your career journey, which is a whole nother level of storytelling to add to that pipeline so that they find their way to your campuses. And it's exciting to hear that once they do that, we are making the shift on campus to accommodate the diversity of our workforce. Um, we're at 2:50, Linda. We've done well. So we've got a few minutes left. For again, those of you who are with us, if there's a question that you want to post in the chat, I invite you to. I promise you, you are in the presence of greatness. These two individuals have a wealth of perspective and wisdom. So please don't shy away from asking a question if you have it. Otherwise, we can talk shop for the next 8 minutes. I have more. Um,
Can I ask a question?
yes, absolutely.
Okay. As far as tenure in positions, what is a trend, if any, that you are seeing? And has that shifted as there's more uncertainty in higher education? Are you seeing people stay in their current positions longer, shorter? No trend, it's just all across the board.
Linda, I was really thinking about that the other day as you hear about the number of fewer job openings across the country. And well, that it always seems like when that happens, there's a swing to, ooh, higher ed. I want to be a hall director. I don't care if I have to live in. That's great. It helps me save money. Um, I I think we went through a period where it felt like if I could keep somebody 2 years, that was a long time. And let's face it, COVID was hard for housing professionals. Particularly on a campus like mine, we were asked to house students who didn't live on campus but lived in the 35-mile radius that couldn't stay at their home because there was a compromised family member at home. We were asked to house and feed and do all of that and get them to their room safely and take the calls. And it was a hard time. And so I had a couple that just stayed a year and then left. What I'm seeing more is that they're staying longer. Like most are staying about 3 years, which is kind of where I was before. I think I mentioned as we were all gathering before the participants came online that this year I hired all but one of the four so three of the four all have a master's in higher ed, which is interesting because I hadn't been there until this year. And so that brings about another interesting nuance, right? When you're maybe one of just a couple that doesn't have the master's degree, and how do you feel like you fit in? Are you an imposter? How do you manage all of those? I think those sentiments and emotions that creep up as well.
I would say in these entry-level positions here, I would say 2 years. And those that tend to stay longer begs the question of why. And I would think 3 years would be the max, like it was before. And if they're not progressing, that's to us, that gives us pause. I also like to have these entry-level folks who are coming from diverse backgrounds to expose them to the operation side as well, and not just the residence life side. So with the facilities, it's not the mundane tasks, but they are part and they understand the process of renovations, and feedback and all that kind of stuff is, and budgets too. We allow our students and our entry-level staff to have the university's T&E card. So they have a budget every year. So we are giving them, it's not huge dollar amounts, but they have to allocate, they have to work with staff and spending and things like that. So really just trying to give them a wide introduction into housing and res life so that they can catch the bug and move on.
Mm-hmm. We also added a mid kind of an advanced live-in position. So we added we have a residence hall director and a complex director, and a complex director will supervise a bachelor level hall director. They have their own building, but then they have an indirect, so it begins to give them that sense of indirect reports. How are you micromanaging? How are you training? How are you utilizing your one-to-one with a professional staff member so that they see that there's a way to stay, but also maybe advance your own career. That I think has helped us keep some of the good employees longer and added just some consistency and some support for as new folks come on board.
Well, I think my last question would be, right, we are having this opportunity today because of ACUHO-I. And so, as the association that serves our profession, are there things that you have in mind we could do as an association to be of service or be a resource of support to your teams or to our profession as we are adjusting to having more diversity in the background and experience of our professionals that are coming into these entry-level roles?
Maybe we need an entry-level institute. Maybe we need, Dinaja, what were some of our ideas from our workforce group?
That supervisory academy is
That
coming. It's
supervisory
coming.
academy and a
Yes.
means of like pairing someone who, particularly if you're new to the profession, what does supervising mean in this arena? And that it doesn't always have to mean it's $1,000 academy you have to go, or a conference you have to go to, or an institute you have to go to, but how do you pair people? How is there a curriculum that you can partner with somebody who is more seasoned with somebody who's new, and you're all sort of covering that same material and then bringing the group together either at the annual conference or bringing the group together in an online format, kind of as a kickoff and a wrap up.
Yeah, I think that idea of pairing, I think the workforce and our profession is continually evolving and we haven't hit the end yet.
Mm-hmm.
So to try to create and put the resources into quote an institute, I think we may miss the boat on that. I think we have to be nimble. I think one of the benefits of the future of the profession is it provides a framework and you can look at each of the individual imperatives and answer the question for your department, like what is needed. And then being able to interact or marry or find the resources. I think one of the most underutilized resources at ACUHO-I is the
The
library.
library.
And
Mm-hmm.
the campus housing index, we're just now like at the tip of the iceberg of all that great data, and how do we seek those patterns that we're saying we're pattern tracking, and so I would like to see that. I think that ACUHO-I has the resources. It's just how are we helping our institutions package it for them.
Well, and Dinaji, very quickly, we talked about this as a part of the workforce sustainability. Oftentimes, the people we report to are of the old guard. When I was, and fill in the blank, and this is what I was expected to do. And it is truly a different generation that's coming in. And so our field has to be nimble. We have to pivot. We have to look at what's important. We have to look at what are good generalist skills, which is how we've always sold our specific profession, is it provides you with a good generalist experience across the board with supervising, advising, managing crisis, budgets, facilities. We have to get back to what is that generalist that's meeting today's workforce ideas.
Well, that is a good last word. I'm not going to touch that. Thank you both. Didn't get as spicy as you thought you might, huh? No, I'm kidding. It was a wonderful conversation.
You
Thank
didn't
you.
let the spiciness come out.
Gay was on her best behavior.
I love it. Sorry, someone put a quick question in the chat, so I'm not going to say goodbye. We're at 2:59, so if you have to go to a meeting, that's fine. But Michael asked a good question, so Gay, if you have just a moment, Michael said they're entering their 6th year as a hall coordinator, third consecutive. They don't necessarily have the desire to take on a higher level position. They know you made a comment about having pause with people who are not progressing. You have any thoughts or ideas?
Sure, I think it's very, and the pause comes and it's based on the individual.
Mhm.
Um, if there if the position allows for people to stay longer, if the university or the institution or that, as long as the individual and the institution can come up with every year, is there something else to tackle, something new, something that would, I think an institution is doing a disservice to employees when you're not providing new opportunities every year for growth. And it should be, as I said, professional growth is a shared responsibility. So I think a conversation every year, because on the flip side, with what's going on in the world, we may see entry level folks needing to stay more than 2 or 3 years,
Mhm.
depending on what the future holds. So I think you have to be flexible, and you just need to take it, year by year and person by person.
And Michael, I would also add that if you're attending this webinar today, you're seeking your own kind of professional growth. Um,
Mhm.
I, a hall director said to me one time, well, I understand you have this 4 years and you're out. And I was like, I don't know, where's that policy? But every time I have somebody in their 4th year say, I want to come back, my conversation has always been, what will you do in a 5th year that will help you progress, that will lead you to what's your next step? What will you do? What can I do to help you get to there? And every time we've had that conversation, they've been, and then the other piece that I always say is, don't tell me how you feel now in April this year. Tell me how you're going to feel in April of next year. Are you still going to have the same enthusiasm? You may have that. You may be garnering more experiences and you might be taking on more responsibilities. It may also depend on what your job description is versus what my entry level job description is versus what Gay's entry level job description is. But I think by your actions today, you're seeking ways to learn more and how you can make that next step. Sometimes it's just the lighting the fire to start paying your own rent or a mortgage.
And Michael, you coined it great, progressive responsibility.
Yeah.
I
Right.
couldn't put it better. As
Right.
long as you feel like you're progressing
Yeah.
in your job, in your personal life, then you're golden.
Well, I will tell you, my takeaways are the importance of adaptive leadership. Okay, that just when you said that, it just like burned itself in my brain. The willingness to pivot, and the emphasis on shared responsibility. Those are three big takeaways for me from the both of you. So thank you for those nuggets. I always walk away with nuggets. So thank you again for your time and for sharing with us. Thank you to our participants for hanging out with us today. And thank you to Linda for so much a wonderful brainchild opportunity. So thank you for your creativity and dreaming this up.
And thank you to our panelists. And for those of you that participated, the recording will be available and you can share it far and wide with your colleagues so we can continue the conversation. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your week, a long weekend, and an even better rest of the semester. Take care, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye.
All right, I'm going to end now. Thank you all very much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Gay, thanks for